Hi, boys. I have a question for the men.
Do these motherfuckers even fucking live?
How's it going, everyone? So today I just wanted to have a bit of a discussion or a dialogue with you, and I wanted to go over a conversation that's kind of going around in the YouTube fitness space, and that is, would you listen to someone who knows everything about lifting but doesn't lift themselves? And I find that question to be troubling in so many different ways, but what I find to be more troubling is the fact that people would say yes, that people would think that someone who has never touched a weight in their life, but on paper knows everything, is an authority when it comes to fitness advice. I am not a fan of this line of reasoning for a couple different reasons, and I'm going to kind of go over that today. So for those of you who are not aware, Jeff Nippard on Instagram created a poll where he asked that very question, and I think the results are 38% of people said yes, and 62% of people said no. So overall, the overwhelming consensus is that the majority of people will agree that they wouldn't take the advice from someone who's never lifted weights. But there's 38% of people who said yes. And I think Jeff is one of those people who are in favor of yes because he knows everything or something of that nature, right? And following this poll, Natural Hypertrophy created a very, very good video discussing this topic, which I will leave in the description or in the comments section below in the pinned comment. But I am throwing my hat into the ring quite late because I think it came up again in a Omar Isuf video. And I think he is more in line with the yes crowd, the Jeff crowd, if you will, where they find it acceptable, or I guess valid to listen to someone who's never lifted a weight in their life. And as a result, on my own channel, I created my own poll where I took a thought experiment that is, pretty common in, I guess, philosophy. And the thought experiment, I won't explain the original one. I decided to put it in the lens of our niche, what we like to do, and the topic at hand. And it is this. If there were an exercise scientist who knew everything about strength and hypertrophy training, but was born in a body that made it impossible for him to lift, right? So that's our starting condition. But then his mind and consciousness were somehow transferred to a new, healthy body that could lift. Would he learn something new after his first training session? Now, Jeff had access to a wider pool of people. Surveys are not the pinnacle of, I guess, data collection. There's a lot of different contaminating factors that go into it. For one, sample size. Two, the types of audiences we have. His audience, for lack of better words, is just more science-based. I would hope, and I have had the impression that most of those watching right now, are a bit able to straddle that line between science and bro science a little bit better, and are more comfortable with bro science, whereas some are, totally against it. I guess I'm very much in a bubble. Most of the people I talk to have some appreciation for bro science, and I'm not too embedded in communities that are just purely science-based, right? So there are some factors that go into this poll and the results of the poll the question I posted. So I only got 208 votes. I'm sure he got a couple thousand. However, 93% of the people who answered my poll said yes, he would learn something new. And of the 7% of people who said no, he wouldn't, I think that their criticism or their rebuttal to this question kind of falls in a similar line of thinking to those like Jeff and Omar. And I'm going to be kind of going through those today. So, and when it comes to this question, some people would say, oh, it's just a semantic issue. If he truly knows everything, then the only possible answer is no, he wouldn't learn anything new. And the other side to this is if you just say by definition or because of semantics, things of that nature. You could also you might also argue that the way the question is posed doesn't allow for further discussion of the matter. And I'm going to kind of give you a brief description of, I guess, formal logic. And here's the thing with formal logic. If I teach you formal logic, I'm not teaching you anything new. Most of it you already know. Most of it you already do on a daily basis. Most of it is done fairly automatically for most people. Common sense is called common sense for a reason. As much as we like to meme and dunk on people for saying they don't have common sense, usually it's not true. I am more in favor of thinking that most people are smarter than we actually give them credit, and that the internet is a poor representation of most people's intelligence. Maybe I'm being optimistic, who knows. However, when it comes to formal logic, as I mentioned, I'm not teaching you anything new. I'm just telling you the framework of how things are already done, and this, put into a nice, neat box with nice, neat words, right? I'm not trying to say that I'm talking down to anyone or trying to explain that you guys aren't thinking right. That's not what I'm trying to do at all. You guys are able to, you guys are rational beings and have good reasons to believe what you believe, so long as you can defend it, right? But when it comes to disagreements, on arguments and arguments in the, not, back and forth, mommy, daddy yelling at each other, or your two favorite fitness influencers, talking shit to each other, not that kind of argument. The kind where there are a set number of statements, some of which support a conclusion, and then one of those statements is being supported by the other statements, right? An argument. There's a couple different ways that you can refute it or form a rebuttal. One of them is to challenge the factual nature of the premises. And the other one is to kind of challenge the relationship between the premises and the conclusion. Now, how does this apply to a thought experiment? Because a thought experiment is not necessarily an argument, it just illustrates one. And in my thought experiment, I say, if there were an exercise scientist who knew everything about strength and hypertrophy training, but was born in a body that makes it impossible for him to lift, but his mind and consciousness were somehow transferred to a new healthy body that could lift, would he learn something new after his first training session? If you make the claim that, well, by definition, he knows everything, so obviously he wouldn't know everything. But then look at the content of the question I'm posing to you. How could he know everything if it's impossible for him to have practical knowledge? If all types of knowledge are physical knowledge, then meaning something tangible, something that you can put into words, something that you could, rationalize and systematize and things of that nature. If all types of knowledge are of that nature, then sure, you have something going for you, but there are issues and consequences with that line of reasoning, which I'll get into in a little bit. But when it comes to the question as it is posed, the reason why most people responded, yes, he would learn something new, is because we have the intuition that you cannot separate practical from theoretical. Not all types of knowledge are physical knowledge. Some types of knowledge can only be gained through experiencing something. And I want you to kind of think about it this way. He might know the exact neural pathways that get activated and all the things that happen when you touch a barbell. But does he know how it feels? Put into words what that feeling is. You would have to appeal to other things in order to make it make sense, but you're not describing the thing itself. You are making these corollaries. You're making these similar things, right? But you're not actually describing the thing itself when you're describing the feeling of it. So, by very nature, sure, you might get hung up on the word, well, he knows everything. But how could he? Is my challenge to you when it comes to this thought experiment. And, I'm not trying to say I am right. I'm just saying that I disagree, and I disagree for these reasons, right? So it's now up to you to, prove my ass wrong, essentially. And I'm not trying to, prove my ass right or anything. I'm just trying to say that there's a problem with the line of thinking that is proposed by people who say, no, he wouldn't learn anything new. And yes, you should listen to someone who doesn't even lift. Because when it comes to this conversation, and when it comes to the more practical consequences of this, knowledge is not purely the ability to memorize something, to regurgitate something, there is usually some level of things that you need to be able to display, right? So natural hypertrophy, use the example of if you ask someone, do you know how to tie your shoe? You would kind of expect them to be able to show you that they know how to do that. And while this, he does a far better job talking about that understanding of knowledge, and that is why, in the way the question is formed, I think it is reasonable to conclude that by the nature of the thought experiment, and not just by definition of the word, which is a very cheap way of looking at philosophy, because we can ham-fist the definition to many words. But the thing is, in order to have a good argument, you need to make sure that both people are functioning off of the same definition, right? And so I will leave that to his video, which I think is a great video to watch. Obviously, no one's going to force you to watch it, but I think most people watching this one probably watch that one as well. But what is the consequence? And the consequence is not just, people themselves, like following influencers, people who have more of an interest to be right than to be helpful. That is one thing, obviously. But it's more so we are running the risk of diminishing one of our sources of authority. And I don't think anyone should try to undermine their own competence, and trying to say that we should listen to people who have never lifted the weight in their life because they know everything is incredibly irresponsible. And Omar Isuf in his video tried to make the added point that if there were a coach who himself didn't lift but had great success in coaching other people, then he should be listened to. And I have some sympathy for that. However, there's a misguided amount of, or the principle behind it is misguided because it applies to the coach being able to create results for other people. But what if he was only able to make those results for himself? Would we be misguided in taking leap of faith, or making the decision to listen to this man if he himself did not coach other people? Should we not listen to him when he gives fitness advice because, well, you weren't a coach? I think it falls into a very self-defeating circle of reasoning, right? So I don't think NH himself actually had a formal position as a coach. I think he mainly produced a wide variety of great natural bodybuilding content, and the only form of authority that was present was his physique. Were we misguided in listening to him because he never coached other people? If we can accept that getting other people results is a viable external amount of evidence for competency or authority, why can we not also apply that to the individual themselves? And then, when we look at someone who has not done that, should we hold them in the same regard as the other two? The answer, in my opinion, is no. And the reason why I say it kind of runs into a circular kind of reasoning, or circular kind of logic that just has no end, is because you're essentially chasing in a imaginary, or not imaginary, but an invisible dragon. What do I mean by this? If I tell you I have a dragon in my living room, the first thing you would say is, oh, hey, cool, like, let me come over and I'll see it. And it's just like, oh, no, he's invisible dragon. And it's just like, oh, okay, cool, I'll just like go there and like, touch around and feel the air until I'll get a feel for him. It's like, oh, no, he's not only is he invisible, he can also turn intangible. And it just kind of goes on and on and on and on until there is some amount of proof that is there that can provide reason to believe that there is a dragon present. What reason is there to believe that this person actually knows everything if they didn't actually lift, or, to Omar's point, didn't actually coach someone? Having knowledge in and of itself is not proof. I'm probably explaining that point very poorly, but I hope that I'm at least making some amount of sense to get you thinking, right? Not necessarily agreeing with me, but at least thinking about this. Because I find it disturbing that we are actively trying to diminish the most, in my opinion, the most important part of, I guess, our pursuit, which is results. And like I said, Omar tried to appeal that so long as you're getting results from a coach or the coach is producing results from other people. But the problem is he applies that solely to the coach's ability to give results to other people, but never himself. And on principle, I cannot see the difference between that. And when it comes to lifting culture now, when it comes to the health and fitness industry beyond this small portion of YouTube, right? Which, you know, not everyone's on YouTube. Not everyone is watching this type of content. So we are a very small niche, right? If you go to any random commercial gym, most of the people will be very unfamiliar with many of the people who make content regularly. Like, as big as their channels are, that is essentially all the people in one city, like one major city, like of people who go to the gym. That's essentially their follower base. So it's quite difficult to get this message across. But the thing is, when it comes to training, when it comes to authority, when it comes to people actually knowing their stuff, it is insufficient for it to be purely on theory, purely on, you know, what you read in a book. I said theory, not the other word. And it is not by definition, but by, no, maybe you could say by definition, but maybe more so by just practical, pragmatic observation. It is impossible to know everything without having practical experience. So that is kind of like my thoughts on the matter. Hopefully it made sense. That was quite a 16-minute rant from myself. Thank you so much for your patience with me. Once again, with the lack of uploads, I have a lot of things planned that are trucking along very slowly. I have a training guide that is coming out pretty soon. I'm mostly done with the content. Now it's just up to formatting, and then I do want to add pictures and things of that nature. I have that coming out. I'm going to be creating a self-coaching playlist. I have made several attempts at this at the past, but I think I just haven't been happy with my own quality of work when it comes to that, and I want to do a better job. So I'm really excited to put together a full self-coaching playlist, and of course, more content, more programs, and I want to consolidate all of my free programs into one place, so that way it's a bit easier. It's a bit disjointed right now, which I'm not proud of. You know, that's a result of lack of planning on my part, lack of competency on my part, and I just want to do a better job for you. So thank you so much for your patience while doing that. I graduate from my bachelor's program this December, so uploads will happen when they happen, and until that time, peace.